What is up? I'm Harbor with Extra Credit Design Club, and today we're going to get spicy, and we're going to talk about the ethic and moral implications of AI and image generation. I believe that if you are a graphic designer and you are not leaning into AI, you should at least be familiarizing yourself with it. It's super important in any given field to be aware of emerging technologies and trends. I understand that not every new thing that comes up is going to catch on and be the new thing. I'm sure there were poo-pooers when the internet came around and said, just another fad, I'm not going to look at it. And those people's business, I'm looking at you, Toys R Us. I'm sorry, no qualms at Toys R Us. But your business will suffer if you are at least not familiarizing yourself with the new advents of technology. Perhaps AI will change the landscape of graphic design, illustration, photography, anything that deals with a visual digital craft. Perhaps it will not. However, with the advent of any new technology also comes moral, ethical questions that precede even legal questions. Some graphic designers I've talked to think that AI is devil incarnate, that it just is wrong to use it in all respects. Others, hey, give me all the AI, I'm a Scrooge McDuck, backflip into a coin pot of AI. You know, there's two ends of the spectrum. In this video, I kind of want to take a middle stance, a graphic designer who's trying to navigate how comfortable am I using AI ethically? What am I okay with doing? What am I okay with not doing? I'm going to address three main arguments that I hear when it comes to AI and ethics. Number one is that AI uses people's image without their permission. Number two is that AI will take jobs from humans. And number three is that AI divorces humans from craft. That one's a bit of a trickier one, and honestly, I could do a whole separate video on that, but I will just touch on it briefly in this video. Moral qualm number one. AI image generation uses people's work without their permission. Yes, it does. There's no legal framework to, when you create something, check a box that says okay or not okay for an AI to reference this work. So it's not a legal issue. But there are some legal things in place that kind of can give you a framework. If you take your moral cues from the US legal system, that's your whole thing. Maybe that's something else to talk about. Again, this is no judgment passed, but I'm just going to explain some of the legal framework, and maybe you can jump off of that. AI aside, there are legal ways that you can use another artist's work without their consent. I'm talking about for critique, I'm talking about for satire, and if you change that work 30%. Also, if that artist has passed away, I believe 75, 100 years ago, then their work becomes in the public domain and have at. Now, I'm no lawyer, I'm not giving legal advice here, I am just telling you what the implications, what the laws are. Again, if you're taking moral cues from US laws, that's your thing. I'm not going to say that's good or bad, but if you are taking moral cues outside of that, let's touch on it. Obviously, at face value, it's wrong to use people's work without their permission. If we're just black and white, boom. But I would say consider this. Graphic designers use artists' work without their permission all of the time. I'm talking about mood boarding. Mood boarding is a huge part of graphic design, or a huge part of many people's graphic design practice. You have a client and you don't want to start some actual work, you want to kind of gauge their vibe, get a temperature, so you put together a mood board and say, this is what I'm thinking. Now, often, what happens is the client looks at the mood board and they kind of hone in on one particular image and they say, I love that, I want that, make that, but for me. And that's personally why I don't like to use mood boards. But that aside, you are using that artist's work without their permission, and sometimes that can be detrimental when a client hones in on a specific work and wants you to create something very derivative of that work. So maybe we can use AI to divorce ourselves one step further from original works from artists. When you're mood boarding, instead of just Googling, cyberpunk kitty cats playing violins, maybe you use that as a prompt in an image generation AI. That way, instead of the Google results being original works from artists, your AI will at least be one step divorced from those original works. That way, when you show them to a client, they will be 2 steps divorced from that original work when you end up creating your final project. Something to consider. Again, I don't want to take any hard stance in this video telling you what's right and what's wrong, but I just want to have you consider that maybe that's a better way than showing direct images to clients, having them request, do that, but for me. Divorce yourself one step further from those original works using AI. Then, when it's time for the actual creation after the mood board, you don't even gotta touch the AI stuff. Work how you regularly work. Qualm number 2 is that it is taking jobs from humans. So maybe I'm gonna use this as an example. Somebody comes to you and they say, hey, I want an illustration of a 5-footed rabbit in the style of, X, Y, or Z illustrator. Just type it into Midjourney, it's fine. We don't gotta hire them. It's all fine. If I'm a middle ground graphic designer, that doesn't pass the smell test for me, most likely. I'm just gonna say, no, just hire the illustrator. Now, if somebody approached me requesting something like this, nobody has yet, but if they were to do so, I, as a graphic designer, would probably respond with something like, hey, remember graphic design? It's about communication. It's about visual communication, visual representation of an idea, of an emotion, of a feeling, of a process. Is there a way that we can convey X, Y, or Z feeling, emotion, process, idea without being derivative of a certain artist? Chances are, yes, 100% it's going to be yes. You can convey young, contemporary, this, that, in 1,000 different ways, and it doesn't need to include being derivative of a certain illustrator. Now, if you take one step back from specific cases where you are prompting in the style of X, Y, or Z artist, and just as a more general issue, is it wrong to use AI yourself as opposed to hiring out an illustrator to generate your images? I would invite you, whether or not, to consider if you have any moral qualms with taking and posting a selfie. Because this is the same debate. Imagine this. It's back in the day. You're a painter. Before the advent of photography, much less the selfie and social media. Right? So you're a painter. Your job was to capture the likeness of a person so that that person might distribute their likeness for religious reasons, for courting, for what have you. As a painter, you captured that likeness so that person might distribute it. Then here comes the camera. All right? So that person no longer needs to hire a painter. They can just click. It wasn't like that back in the day, but essentially it evolved into just click and distribute myself. We need no painters in the mix. So if it's a moral issue, it shouldn't change with time. Morals are right and wrong. And is it morally wrong to capture an image of yourself, render your likeness to be able to distribute it without first consulting a painter, without using a painter? I think chances are most people nowadays are going to say, no, it is fine to take a selfie and post it. It takes one human out of the equation, but that's just the way it is. Now, I do understand that this is a bit of an imperfect metaphor. Photography and painting and that struggle happened 100 years ago in the past. And now it's different because AI will actively take away jobs from people that are working, whereas painting has evolved into its own separate art form, photography into its own separate art form. They are no longer in competing categories, and the person who snaps an image no longer thinks, hey, I'm putting a painter out of work. Because painting shifted, changed, evolved to its own thing, and photography kind of took the place of capturing and distributing likeness. So you might ask yourself, in 100, 200 years, I won't have a problem with it. But right now, taking away the jobs that people currently depend on, illustrators or designers or photographers, taking away their current income, I got a problem with that. And that is understandable. I don't think there is an easy answer for that. If I'm a middle ground designer, tough to say. But if I can step away from the, character of the middle ground designer for now and speak from the perspective of Harbor, I believe that AI image generation will change the field of illustration, graphic design, photography, even type design. So what can I do? I'm going to take cues from the photographers back in the day. They were skilled craftsmen in a service industry. I, as a graphic designer, am a skilled craftsman in a service industry. And I know that it's going to change very rapidly, very soon, possibly. So, I'm not going to hang my hat on the identity of graphic designer. Rather, I'm going to zoom out, I'm going to look at myself and think I am a skilled craftsman. I am an image generator. I am a visual communicator, a visual problem solver. And how can I reapply those skills in an industry in a way that I feel is more secure, more future-facing, has growth in the future rather than replacement from machines? And I am going to allocate a small portion of my time to developing those different interests, pursuing those other paths. So just in case, if I am really worried about being replaced, I will have a backup. Now, I know that that's tough to hear. Everyone is happy when we're comfortable and we can just do what we've always done and make the same money we've always made. But in the real world, unfortunately, any industry ebbs and flows, whether it's through the advent of new technology, whether it's culture or economic or any number of factors. Industries are going to ebb and flow, and I would encourage you at this time, if you are a designer worried, to take a step back, consider your broader skill set and interests, and think how you might reapply those into an industry that is flourishing. Moral qualm number 3. This one is the trickiest one to tackle. Like I said, this could be its whole dialogue. Me and my wife, before recording this, had this discussion of how do we define this? How do we talk about it? Is it immoral? Is it, And that is is AI divorces humanity from creativity. Before we get into the semantics and specifics, we need to ask ourselves, is it immoral to divorce humanity from creativity? And if so, does it exist on a scale? Is it more moral to finger paint than it is to use a paintbrush? If you're using a paintbrush, you never actually touch the pigment. You never actually touch the creation. You touch the brush touches the paint ends up on the canvas, and you didn't actually physically touch any part of the art. You could take it one step further. Is it morally wrong to then create a digital painting? Not only did you not touch pigment, but you created a painting that could be replicated and distributed with very little human interaction through ones and zeros and math and lights and things that are fallible. And then you will ask yourself, is it immoral to speak a couple of words at a particular time and place, and having spoken those words, an image was created? That's kind of what AI does. You type into the computer a certain prompt, type words, and an image is created based on an algorithm that another human made that you've never met and talked to, that's learning from the works that other people have created, and maybe learning from the works that it has created from the works that other people have created, and who knows how many times that has been divorced. So, is it inherently morally wrong to divorce humanity from creativity in the sense of a skilled craft using the hand, intimately interacting with the materials and medium? If so, is it more immoral to use a paintbrush than to finger paint? Is it really a question of morality? Or maybe is it a question of value? Obviously, paint on canvas is going to be more valuable than an AI-generated image most of the time, because we recognize time went into the painting, years of practice, physical materials went into it. So maybe it's not a moral issue, maybe it's an issue of value, and maybe it's an issue of skill, and that AI divorces skill and craftsmanship from image generation, which is something that humans innately value. This skill, this devotion, mastery of craft, something that's really not needed with most AI prompts. You don't have to spend 20 years studying human anatomy to recreate an image of a human with image generation. So perhaps we have an aversion to it, not because we're morally opposed to it. Perhaps the aversion comes from it lacks skill and mastery that we just inherently, innately value. Or perhaps it's an element of control. We're giving up control. Whereas a painter controls every stroke he puts on the canvas, every brush stroke, the exact color of the paint. It's an issue of control. But then we need to think, there are beautiful works of art that give up some amount of control. If you think of Jackson Pollock, when he throws the paint on the canvas willy-nilly, it's very random, more so than Michelangelo or what have you. Another thing that I think of is the spiral jetty in the Great Salt Lake from Robert Smithson. It's a kind of massive earth sculpture of a spiral. He made it, and then it was covered up with the Great Salt Lake. Sat there for years and years and years, and then was uncovered. And it had changed from the tides of the lake, the salt, erosion, the chemicals in the water, all kinds of things. It was out of his control what was going to happen at that point. But it's still very beautiful. I wish I had some solid answers to this moral qualm number 3. But as close as I can get to a solid answer is asking, is it a moral issue? Are you morally opposed to it? Or do you have an aversion because you see it as less valuable? Is that value due to a lack of mastery of craft and human skill? Is it due to a lack of control? You decide, because I don't think I've got there yet. I would love to hear what you have to say in the comments, and maybe with more minds working at this, we can come up with a conclusion. So that's that, an attempt at kind of framing out moral, ethical issues with AI. If I missed anything, I would love to hear from you in the comments. Again, I'm passing no judgment. If you're far this way, far that way, I'm more interested in the discussion than I am coming up with that's right, that's wrong. I would rather solutions be presented to somebody no matter where they're at on the spectrum, as opposed to trying to force, this point of the spectrum is perfectly right. Do it. I don't think that that's something that should exist within graphic design. But anyways, there you have it. I'm Harbert with Extra Credit Design Club, and as always, catch you in the next.